Welcome to the High Performance Interviews. Today I'm joined by high performance coach Marcus Lefton. Hi, Marcus.
Hi, Lucy. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for taking the time to be here. So, just want to give the audience a little bit of background, first of all, and then I'm going to ask you about your story and how you came to do what you're doing. So, Marcus is from Scottsdale, Arizona. He is a high performance consultant and coach with over a decade of experience helping individuals and teams reach higher standards of performance and self-actualization. For the better part of his life, he's been obsessed with uncovering the principles behind success and high performance, not only for himself, but across every team and domain that he has stepped foot into. So, Marcus, with that, I would love to hear how you came to be a high performance coach. What led you into that? What's your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Lucy. And so happy to start from the beginning. Little Marcus was very fascinated by sport, and that's definitely where this high performance game started and was able to throw myself into the realm of baseball. And so, long story short, was trying to be a professional athlete most of my life. Had a lot of key successes, but more importantly, a lot of opportunities where I was humbled. Right. I think just like any other high performance coach or consultant, there are a lot of places where we have failed, have been humbled, and ultimately started the journey to uncover some of these principles. Right. And so for me as the individual, that's definitely where it started. And then it went through a wide variety of domains. And so I was very lucky initially to move into a little bit of personal training right out of college to leverage my physiology, but then also business and entrepreneurship degree. And then from there was very lucky to get paired into an internship with a high performance startup that was aimed at delivering force plate analytics, but more specifically, just objective analytics that could help predict injuries. Right. So that was my first exposure to baseball players, professional athletes, rugby players, Facebook, Google, just high performers in general. Getting to be a part of the Bay Area, there was a lot of speed in the culture that was going on over there. All right. And so take that, learned a lot, got to dive into a lot of the key principles of sports science and high performance, and really laid the land for some of the analytics in my background, and then was able to pair that into my next step, which was working with the Colorado Rockies. And
Right.
so from there, got to dive into a little bit more of my passion of baseball and diving into high performance. And then, long story short, on a small team that we were able to be a part of, we introduced force plate analytics that ultimately allowed us to reduce organizational injuries by about 50%, and then also increase on-field performance that ultimately led to one of my most memorable experiences with the Rockies, which was the champagne shower. We were one game away from winning the NL West, I believe in 2018 or 19. And albeit that was very exciting, it also created a lot of awareness about where we were lacking.
Mm.
Right. And so, albeit there was a lot of success, there was still a handful of us that were ready to create new normals to disrupt and continue to move into the right direction. And so, maybe came to a little bit of a, let's just say, standstill of values to where there was a lack of alignment. And many of us left. We left the organization with the idea that we could deliver better performance and more specific, holistic performance across the board.
So was it the board that was stopping you to innovate and to create those new normals?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think, like many will see in most industries, departments are siloed, and in high performance, silos are not something that's advantageous. Right. And I think whenever we're trying to control development, it's really important to understand how each key piece kind of folds into this overall high performance development that we're trying to create. And unfortunately, there was a little bit of a values conflict, let's just say, with how we all wanted to go about it. A lot of us left, right, created our own private practices that were a little bit more aimed at this holistic development that we're kind of alluding to. And then from there, had a lot of success. I got to work
Mm.
with a handful of individuals that signed big contract, got to work with a handful of individuals in different domains. And then another key piece of my past was getting to align with a beautiful community called Flow Research Collective. Right, which brings me to now where we're currently at in this landscape of high performance and continuing to move to deliver some of this at scale, more specifically, principles, mechanisms that transcend industries.
So yeah, so a lot of people and maybe our audience are thinking peak performance, is that not just for athletes? Is that just for sports people? And I know when I've ever spoken about it, it's like, well, I don't relate it to anything else but peak performance with teams and athletes, which is
Mhm.
obviously where you started out with the sports and the love for that. But it's not just that, is it? Can you speak on that a bit more, Marcus? How does that translate into somebody's normal person's life?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think this is truly what I'm passionate about at a little bit more scale. And I think the beauty of all of this is absolutely, right? Sport is an easy place for all of us to see high performance working and creating success. But
Mm.
for whatever reason, a lot of people feel that it's further away from them than they potentially want. Right. And I think some of the pieces that we've been able to deliver, getting to work with a wide variety of domains, is getting to show people that regardless of the domain, these principles remain the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, it's easy to see in sport and it's easy to see how that delivers them the outcomes or increases the odds towards those outcomes. But in my opinion, it's no different for the everyday average worker, right? Or what we call as executive athletes, right?
Mm.
The mindset should remain the same, the principles should remain the same. And in my opinion, it's actually harder. It's actually harder to achieve high performance, right? And I think the simplest place that a lot of people can resonate with that comment is that professional athletes have an off season. They
Uh-huh.
devote
Yeah.
half of the year to training their specific skills to then find their high performance when the time calls for it, right? Or when the arena is available. Business, entrepreneurship, motherhood, doctorhood, whatever you want to call it, right? Being a high performer in any other domain that is outside professional sports, you rarely get that time off.
That's so true. I've never thought of it like that before. With the athlete, it's just one thing, right? With an
Indeed.
executive, it's possibly more than one thing they're having to hone in on. And they're not honing in on that thing, which obviously that's where high performance strategies can come in because it helps them to hone in on the one thing that's going to make the needle move the furthest and the fastest over a shorter period of time, right? So,
Yes,
ooh,
indeed.
yeah,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
think, I mean, just to pull the thread a little bit more on that, it's very easy to understand how a professional athlete training in the weight room is providing them a transition or a transferable skill to the on-field performance, right? And I think what happens in what we'll call business is that direct correlation is not as obvious.
Mm.
But what we'll hopefully talk about today is there are key pieces that are very similar to where these same principles and aspects of training to prepare for the chaos should be relatively the same with obviously the nuance changing.
Yeah, most definitely. From what I know I've learned through becoming a peak performance coach is that it's all transferable. Everything is transferable to that normal everyday person who wants to level up, who wants to become the best version of themselves. And I know that's a very used term these days, become
Mhm.
the best version of yourself. But truly, people have so much to give as long as they don't do some things and they do some things. And that's as with the peak performance, you're giving them a toolbox. We're giving them a toolbox to go away and use and helping them to take away things that they don't need to have in their environment. So it's as much as gaining new skills and undoing some of the stuff that they're doing and stopping doing some of the stuff that they're doing. And that getting that balance right makes such a big difference. So speak on the elimination things. What
Mhm.
what would they need to perhaps eliminate if somebody's looking at this and going, well, how might that work for me?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And hopefully I'll be able to provide this in a way that's not domain specific. But I think from just understanding high performance, a lot of people try to add to the puzzle first, right? We want to do more work. We want to dive into this aspect of specificity. We want to train this skill to where it's extremely difficult to add to a very chaotic puzzle. And so for high performers, more often than not, the place to start is through elimination. What can we say no to so that we can actually say yes to this? And once again, for professional athletes, that becomes pretty clear
Hmm.
because it's merit based. You have statistics, you have objectives, you have analytics, you're pretty much understanding where your limiting factors are, and the specifics on how to get there are very clear. I'm not sure that's as clear for the business executive. And so this is where it becomes, yes, elimination is great, but what?
Yes.
How do we prioritize? What do we eliminate? And I think for professional athletes, it's easy because they have clarity of ideal. Every single team is trying to win a championship. Every single player is trying to create new norms, be the all-star, be the high-level Hall of Famer, whatever it is. For a business person, I think those objectives are very vague and unclear. And I think anytime where you have unclear overall ideal objectives, it gets very difficult on how do you truly prioritize, and in this case, prioritize what should be eliminated.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that is a big thing, isn't it? It's like, I just want to do more. People want to do more. If I can do more, I can become more. If I do more, I can get a higher level. But you have to create the space first to be
Mhm.
able to do more. And eliminating, like you say, is the way to do that. And
Indeed.
that's building a muscle in itself, isn't it?
It's a piece of mastery that's never truly about a rival, let's be fair. And
Yeah,
it's not easy.
absolutely.
It's counterintuitive, right? It doesn't make sense to sit there and just say no to a couple things. But at the end of the day, everything takes resources.
Mm,
Nothing is truly free. And
mm.
so if we can curate and design a life rather than through moving it in a default way, we're just going to give ourselves the best chance, which is ultimately what we're trying to do here is increase the odds of high performance.
Yeah, I know you've helped a lot of people. With the people that you're helping, not everybody is the same. Not everybody comes as that same person. So there's an individual element to it, right? So, and we were speaking earlier, if somebody has something like ADHD, attention deficit disorder, and we're trying to help them push through the struggle to get into the flow state, and they're struggling to push through the struggle because they can't stay attentive that long.
Mhm.
Have you found some tools, or is there a different way to work with somebody who's like that, Marcus?
It's a really good question. And I think rather than be specific to this individual, I think it's going to be kind of important to take a step back. And I will say for somebody that has, let's just say ADD or ADHD, the odds are against you. It is going to be a little bit more difficult to increase the odds of high performance. That's just the baseline. And this is an important reminder that while it would be great for everybody to show up at the same baseline, for us to all work from that very specific baseline to put X, Y, and Z in place and to engineer and create the seamless outcomes, that's not reality. And so it's truly understanding as a coach or consultant, the number one place to start is N equals one, meaning that what works for Johnny over here is not always going to work for Sally. And it's truly important to understanding the individual in front of you, but then learning them, helping them learn themselves to truly build in the playbook, the experiments, and ultimately the rituals to increase the odds over time. And so in this case, what I would say for the individual that might be struggling to struggle, just go back to the basics. Understand how to increase the skill of attention, how to resensitize to the molecule of more dopamine. Like these are all key pieces that need to happen before ultimately diving into these high level pieces of struggle, release, and trying to find the nuance of timing. Right. So this is truly why like mastering the basics, like understanding how to remove flow blockers, to set up your temple of flow, to increase the odds to find focus regardless of flow is the first place to start.
Yeah, it's building in that foundation. If you think of it as a house, you've got to get the foundation right, and a lot goes into that foundation before you go, okay, now and that piece goes up really fast, whereas the
Indeed.
foundation takes a long time. And as you so rightly say, everybody's coming from a different perspective, a different character, different challenges within their life. And somebody who's a single mum or a single parent is going to be different than somebody who's got all the support at home and is that executive athlete who doesn't have all of that other stuff that they've got to deal with, right? Okay, I love that. What would you say to somebody who says, I don't have time to recover? Because we look at recovery a lot and making a
Mhm.
big deal of that. So, active recovery, different types of recovery. They're like, I don't have time to rest. I don't have time to stop, Marcus. I've got to just get this thing done. And they don't really understand what the importance of recovery is.
Yeah, so very common question we get, and I think it's an unfortunate place because I think society has imposed a lot of this like more and more and more grind, grind, grind mentality, and perceivably that has probably delivered some success, right, to some
Mhm.
individuals that we can observe, and that's kind of embedded this system that in a lot of the literature and a lot of our opinions, it's not advantageous. And so we have a very specific biology. We have ultradian cycles where, to be fair, we don't have consistent energy. We have oscillations. In the literature, it's about 90 minutes to 2 hours of high intense sprint like actions, followed by about 20 minutes of rest.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously, there's a little bit of nuance there. But if we can go to the literature and just start with that framework, that can give us the permission to rest. And the mantra that we at FRC have popularized is understanding the idea of slowing down to speed up.
Mm, yeah.
Right. And so anything that you are doing takes resources. We need to go to the gas tank and fill up those resources more periodically. I don't think there's anybody out here that would go for a 5 hour drive and then be like, you know what? That 5 minutes at the gas station, I don't have time for that. We don't have any time to go up and refuel. We're just going to keep going. And you keep going. All of a sudden, the car breaks down. You're spending 4 more hours because you're in the middle of nowhere. Like, to me, this is very synonymous to what most workers go through, which is this go, 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 crash the system at the
Crash.
end of the day.
Yeah. And that
Where we,
burnout. Oh my
where
goodness.
it's a slippery slope to burnout in isolation for that day, but in the macro grand scheme of your schedule as well. And this is where, let's just say player B does that, where they go, 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 crash at the end of the day. And then player A is like, okay, I'm going to be very intentional. I'm going to create clarity of task and goals of what I want to get done. I'm going to have sprint like actions followed by rest. Sprint like action followed by rest. And the person that can oscillate with that intention and
Mm,
have the skills to do it reliably is going to outlast player B every single time.
yeah.
Right. And I think what I would love for people to really start to dive into is just ask yourself, like counterintuitively, is this schedule actually getting me to where I want to go? Right. I would understand that there is no capacity that this schedule of more is actually getting you to where you want to go. It is just a mindset and some piece of society that has been imposed on us. And so this is where like building the experiment to just see how a little bit of filling up the gas tank can provide you with more intentional resources is a big piece of what we talk about.
Yeah. And it really can, because even just taking 2 to 5 minutes to stop, to do absolutely nothing, that wall staring, cloud staring, whatever that thing is, a bit of breath work, a bit of stretching, and absolutely switching everything off, you can come back even after that short period of time, as long as you're doing it in breaks through the day, you can come back refreshed instead of kind of nodding off to your work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
There
if
will be a law of diminishing returns at some point. This is true.
Yeah. And I know it's that thing of this is the culture, and especially the culture at work. My boss doesn't want me to rest. My boss won't, he wants to have this piece of work right, at the end of the day on his desk. And so the bosses are pushing people, and I've seen it with people in my own personal life. They are being pushed and pushed and pushed, and they are not taking care of their health. They are heading for burnout. They're overwhelmed. They're not taking care of their bodies, and all of it for the expense of somebody else's business. So you have to put yourself first. And so there has to be self-care, right? And I know for yourself, Marcus, you've got a hugely busy life, because it's not just work, it's also family, right? So you have to take everything, it's holistic, it's everything and everybody into account. So what is your personal active recovery routine?
It's a great question, and hopefully able to share some key insights here. And I will say this, I try to vary it. Do you think that novelty is a big piece that allows consistency and adherence to like allow you to move into the right direction over time? And so I try to vary it, but I will say that I have key intentions of like where that variability has constraints. And so full transparency, number one thing that I rely on is some sort of breathing.
Mm.
Right. Breathing is the most free and readily available tool to tinker your nervous system. And so any way that you can leverage that real time, definitely something that I get to dive into. And more specifically for me, have a lot of client interfacing, have a lot of presentations, have to transition between a wide variety of tasks. So I don't have a whole bunch of time per se to allocate towards specific active recovery protocols throughout the day. But what I will do is emphasize the transition and be super intentional with removing physiology and psychology before entering the next task. Right. And so, for example, there are going to be times where, I go back to back to back to back to back meetings, client interfacing, then go upstairs, have to take care of my 1 year old with my wife and all the above. But if you have 30 seconds, there's an opportunity. If you have 8 seconds, there's an opportunity. right? And very specifically for me, as I've learned myself throughout the years, just a little exhale emphasized breathing, the physiological side that Huberman has popularized over the course of time, that in itself for 30 seconds will arbitrarily take me from up here to down here.
Mm,
And that in itself, albeit it's not completely ideal, it's definitely not plan A, it's enough.
yeah.
It's minimum effective dose to truly transition and remove some of that physiology and psychology. And so I'm happy to share any of my more in-depth active recovery protocols, because I'm sure that's something that people are curious about. But to me, that specific intention is absolutely game changing
Mm.
because we don't have a lot of time. Let's be fair.
It's yeah, it's limited. And so when you talk about going from, just for our audience, when you talk about going from up here to down here, what do you specifically mean in perhaps in layman's language about that?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I'm just trying to find the here and now. Right. I'm trying to bring myself to this present moment, knowing that the task that I was just in was delivering me that more physiology and psychology. You could argue that there was an elevated heart rate, there was a narrowing of vision. And so, to some degree, we were in a very intense focus and flow state. The intention is then to remove yourself out of that by engaging the parasympathetic state, by finding the here and now, trusting that that will deliver you the rest and digest system to recover the rest of the resources so that you can sprint again,
Yeah.
that you can flow again, that you can be very intentional with wherever those resources go.
Because I can remember when we worked together asking you that question. It's like, you just come off a call, you're on to another one. How do you do that? And that was exactly the answer. It was, I breathe. I do my
Indeed.
breathing to bring me back. It's like almost coming back to center. So you're not leaving something there that's coming through into the next one. It's like reset, fast
Yeah,
reset. And not ideal, as
100%.
you say, but it's a fast reset as that what I think of as that center state. Right. So like you say, you can then you're off again. You're
Yeah, and I think, I
running again.
mean, I'm sure a lot of your audience has, been familiar with Huberman and he's talked a lot through these strategies, but it's an important reminder to really think about whenever you try to change the mind with the mind, it's probably not going to work. So we really have to double down on these physiological tools to create the state shifts and the cognitive shifts that we're looking for so that we can move through our days in chaos with just a little bit more class, a little bit more grace. Because let's be fair, if we're constantly go, 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 we don't have the skills to find the here and now, it is just a matter of time.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is just a matter of time.
I like that. With grace. Do it with grace. And with looking at somebody who's okay, they're going, that all sounds really interesting. I don't have to be an athlete to be a peak performer, but I would like to level up my game and I would like to get better. Where do I start? What would your three top tips be for somebody who's thinking, yeah, I really like the sound of that? What can I do for myself to at least get started?
Go. Number one is action, right? And I think this is an important reminder to come back to the framework of how do you start anything?
Mm,
How do you launch a product? How do you come up with a new program? How do you iterate? All of the above. And to me, it's minimally viable, right? Come sort of some sort of minimum effective dose, generate some noise to get some feedback, and then iterate product market fit. And so in this case, for those people that are trying to go out there and start to increase the odds for high performance, do that. Start.
yeah.
Pick one thing. Full transparency, there are going to be other things that you can pick. And so this is where understanding dispersion is the enemy. But if we can just prioritize, but more specifically have a system of auditing and then some sort of system of action after review, we're going to gain that strategic accuracy over time. Right. And I think this is one of the most crippling parts is people think they have to put the most perfect play or perfect step in place to where that is the exact opposite principle of high performance. Right. We need to iterate. We need to put actions in place to gain data and then iterate off of that data to then move a little bit closer. Having said that, now to be a little bit more specific to your audience here, what I will say that pulls off of what I just said there is own it. Take ownership of your life, take ownership of your career, take ownership of your performance. We live in a beautiful day and age where all of this is out there for free.
Yeah.
And maybe not all of it. That's not completely fair. But there is a lot of information that you can exploit for free. There's a beautiful book called Mastery by Robert Greene that talks about assigning yourself mentors that ultimately, beautiful thing about it, you don't actually have to know. Right. And so take ownership, understand where you're at, don't identify with where you're at, and just move closer towards ideal.
Mm.
right? And the one analogy that I do like to give people here is just trust the mall analogy. We'll go to Target, and you're like, I have never been to this mall before. Let's go find the directory. Right? So you go find the directory, and what does the directory tell you? Very
Yeah.
specifically, you are here. Does that mean you're there all day? Hopefully not. Does that mean you're there for the rest of your life? I sure as hell hope not. But it is a key piece that can help us decide to where we want to go.
Yeah.
And so target is the ideal North Star. We then reverse engineer from ideal North Star to today or to perceivably where you're at. And then you move. You have that action. You have that action after review and you continue to iterate. The problem that I see a lot of people is they identify with wherever they're currently at, and then that becomes crippling to create inaction.
Mm.
Right. So, number one is just take ownership, understand there are things you can do today to increase the odds, and it is all out there for readily available and free.
Yeah.
Right. So that is my number one suggestion to anybody that start trying to get into it. But I'm happy to talk about any more specifics of how to vet or, look for a very specific coach or consultant.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe that's tip number two, but also having, like you say, there's resources out there. There's YouTube, there's books you can find on the subject, but there isn't anything like, as somebody said to me, the trouble with trying to see how you need to change is you're inside the bottle. You can't read what's on the outside, and having that person on the outside, seeing it from a different angle and helping you to move in the way that you want to move, they can see those things because a good coach is going to pull that out of you. They're not telling you what to do. You're telling them actually at the end of the day, but they're asking you the right questions, right? So
Indeed. To
yeah.
the thought-provoking questions to strip out some of the specifics, indeed.
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Do talk on that. So if somebody then goes, well, perhaps I'll look for a coach then, well, how do I find the right coach for me? Do they have to be a peak performer in my area that I want to perform in? If I'm an executive, do I have to have somebody who's an executive and absolutely gone through the roof with being an executive to be that coach? Well, I know the answer to that, but
Yeah, no,
over
I
to you.
appreciate that. And listen, I think there's always going to be opportunities to find somebody who's gotten a look behind the curtains that has a high level of mastery within the high performance space. But even to take it a step back, if you are looking for a coach and more specifically a consultant, it has to be somebody that's done it before, period. It has to be somebody that has done it before in a domain and has been able to create and solve problems for themselves, and then obviously be able to create and solve problems for everybody else.
Mm.
And to be able to identify where the limiting factors are, the bottlenecks. And to me, this is also something that's probably a little bit more of my own, let's just say, opinion, is it should be somebody that can also be a little bit more objective. Right. I think we live in a world where there's a lot of subjectivity. There's a lot of people out there that aren't creating win-win partnerships. I'm not going to call anybody out, but I think that there's just a handful of, either therapy, coaching, consulting, where a lot of the intentions aren't being met. And I think that comes from a lack of awareness of like what truly is going on. And I think this is where like somebody with analytics background, some sort of objective data to pair into the process can really help be directional and specific for that person. And I think that's always going to be a big piece of how you then understand where you're currently at to then more importantly decide where you want to go. And so a little bit of a long-winded answer there to bring it back home. It's truly somebody that's been there. Right. And then somebody that can think through optimization, but then truly understand that health precedes performance every single time.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Again, that's another foundation. Because if you're not healthy, you can't perform at your best, whether you're an athlete or whether you're anybody doing whatever you're doing. Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. And so then what would your next tip be?
At that point, trust. Have trust in the process.
Mm.
And I think just like anything else, there's always going to be some sort of shiny object to explore. There's always going to be a new coach. There's going to be always going to be a new consultant. There's going to be a new framework, a new way to go about it. But trust that there are going to be opportunities to exploit and knowing that trusting the process, seeing it through the long term, having a plan is better than having no plan.
Yeah.
Right. And I guess the final piece here is I know it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but amateurs cost a lot more than an expert does.
Ooh, like that.
Maybe not in isolation, but in the long term, I promise you every single time an amateur will cost you a lot more than an expert will.
Mm.
And so invest.
Yeah.
Invest in the people that you trust, invest in the people that have done it before, because there's a lot of hype in a world that should be just about experts.
Yeah.
Remove the
Yeah.
hyperts.
And be in alignment with that person as well, right? So have a call with that person and make sure that
Yeah, they
you're on the
resonate.
same track and you gel, right? Because
Absolutely.
so I will work with people that are in alignment with me, that I know I can help because of the stuff that I've been through and where I've come from. And your experience is different than mine. So you will attract different people than I
Indeed.
will attract, right? So having that conversation to understand if there is a gel between the person looking for somebody and the person who's saying, yep, I can do the do and I can be your coach and all of that is so important. That,
It has to resonate.
yeah, has to resonate. Absolutely.
Let's be fair. Who wants to spend time with somebody they don't like, right? And so I think always finding somebody that has like-minded vision, that's fun to be around, that makes the process a little bit more lighthearted is always a key piece of high performance because it's a lifelong game.
Yeah.
And I think any way that we can make it a little bit less daunting, a little bit more fun, that in its own self is a high value from a coach or consultant.
Yeah.
Not easy though.
Fantastic. Marcus, is that before we finish off here, is there anything else you would like to share with the audience that's kind of on your heart?
I mean, just to pull the thread a little bit more on the rest side of things, it's tough, right? We live in a day and age where, the grind mentality and the more mentality is still very prevalent. But this is also an opportunity to remember that new levels of performance are being determined every single day.
Mm,
Right. So find those like-minded individuals, hunt for those opportunities to give yourself a little bit of time back. And if you can't find yourself diving into the aspects of rest or being a part of an organization that actually allows the employee to find some of their resources, then I also think this is a time to revisit ideal,
yeah.
to really think through like what exactly do you want, right? We have a short life. Everybody deserves some aspect of ideal or the rich life that they know they can ultimately create. So don't wait.
Yeah.
There are always pieces of feedback loops that we can keep tight. And I think that's another reminder of a high performer, right? It's just understanding that, like, regardless of wherever you're at, there is something you can do to increase the odds to get you closer towards ideal. And while it might not always be obvious, this is why those physiological tools to create the cognitive shifts are extremely important, right? The ability to go to that 10,000-foot view, the ability to see the forest instead of the trees. All of these are extremely important, not only to survive amidst the chaos, but also to give you the chance to think through what exactly do you want and what are the steps to get there.
Yeah.
Right. I genuinely do not think enough people think through ideal as if a genie was in front of them. And so that would be like my final kind of send off to your audience is go out into nature, put yourself on top of a mountain, go on top of a roof, leave your phone at home, and just think through ideal.
Mm,
What does your rich life look like?
yeah.
And I'd be surprised if there weren't any specific answers there.
Yeah. And allowing yourself to have that contemplation time to really think that through. And sure, there are so many people that don't give themselves time to do that. And it's like, well, I don't know. I don't really have a vision for my life. I'm just going through it.
Mhm.
I'm working through it. I'm doing life rather than thriving in life. And I don't really have a direction. Well, that's if you want to get to that higher level, it's definitely something because you wouldn't hop in your car. If you didn't know where you were going, you'd be going anywhere. But if you've
This is
got a
very true.
direction, you've got a destination. If you want to go from Scottsdale to London, there's a
Take you a long time.
destination and there are lots of ways to get there. But what's the most direct route?
Very well said.
Yeah.
Very well said. And I think that's a very important reminder for the final note that we leave here with, which is design over default. Design over default every single time.
Okay. Right. Well, this has been phenomenal. It's been great catching up with you, Marcus. And for our audience, I'm sure you have got a ton of value from our conversation here. There will be another video popping up on screen, so do hop over there. I'll see you over there. Do hit the like button if you've enjoyed this, and we'll see you next time. Thanks again, Marcus.
Thanks, Lucy.